Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dennis Stone. I'm director of the Center for Advocacy and Social Justice at the Urban League. And today we're talking about charter schools and challenges for the Duval County public school system and schools in general. And I'm delighted to say we have Tracy Pierce, their public affairs person who's been with them for quite some time. And I had the pleasure to work with Tracy when I was at Florida Coastal School of Law. And it's just great to have you with us. And this is being recorded for the benefit of the communities we serve. I'm just grateful that you're doing that for us. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Brooke Livergood, one of our interns, who will introduce Dr. Pierce. And so take it away, Brooke.
Thank you. We'd like to thank Dr. Tracy Pierce for coming to speak with us today. Dr. Tracy Adam Pierce has been with Duval County Public Schools since 2018, serving in the role of Chief of Public Relations and Marketing through the district's successful sales tax referendum, the pandemic, and the successful 1 mil referendum. Prior to working with the school district, Dr. Pierce served as the executive director of the Florida Education Foundation under State Education Commissioner Pam Stewart during Governor Rick Scott's administration. Dr. Pierce spent more than 2 decades in multiple leadership roles at Florida State College at Jacksonville, including a year as the interim president of the downtown campus. He began his career in media relations at Pinellas County Schools in Clearwater. He has a bachelor's degree in public relations from the University of Florida, an MBA from the University of North Florida, and he completed his PhD in higher education at Walden University.
Thank you, Brooke. And would this be a good time for me to share my screen so y'all can see the presentation?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, and I'm trying to figure out how to do that in Zoom.
Do you see the share button with the green arrow
There
at the
it
bottom?
is. Gonna be more obvious. All right, so hopefully you guys can see that now.
Yes.
Why change? Why now? And I want to open up with a bit of an organizational analogy that'll provide a little, I think, a little context to what I'm about to share with you regarding the school district. Once upon a time, there was and still is a company called Macy's department store. They sponsor a very large, very well-known Thanksgiving Day parade in New York. And I think you all are all familiar with that brand name. A few years ago, Macy's was much, much bigger and much more prevalent in retail stores across America than it is today. I just, for the purposes of updating this presentation, just Googled it this morning, and they had recently announced that they're closing yet another round of 150 stores. I was with the state back in, I think it was about 2016 or 2017, when Macy's first started to retract in the marketplace. And the reason I became involved with them is because they used to be the sole sponsor of the Florida State Teacher of the Year program. And for something like 30 or 35 years, they had been the only sponsor of that program. I was lucky enough to be the head of the state's foundation when Macy's, because of the changes in the marketplace, had to inform Commissioner Stewart and myself and others that they would no longer be able to be that sponsor. And what happened to Macy's is very similar to what is happening to us right now. Macy's was plugging along just fine as a retail establishment. And then something called the internet happened. And shortly after the internet happened, something called Amazon happened, and the entire ecosystem of retail shopping changed. And that's kind of where we are in K-12 public education right now. And that's sort of the baseline for why we're pursuing the kinds of changes that we're looking at to the school system. Our ecosystem has changed radically, really over the last 15 years, but even more so out over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. And I'll go into those details here in just a minute. We kind of rocked the world when, or at least the local world, the Jacksonville community, when we made a presentation to the board, when we asked a consultant for a presentation about how we should reorganize or how could we reorganize the school system to meet some very, very challenging financial goals, economic goals, and address some economic challenges that we have. And it wasn't our intention to shake up the world the way we did, to be on virtually every single newscast for about the last, I think, 60 or 90 days. But that's the kind of impact that we had, and that's the kind of impact that some of these changes that we're considering and the kinds of changes that need to be made are going to have on our community. So with that analogy to Macy's and kind of understanding that the ecosystem has really evolved, really shifted, I want to go into some details about what we're experiencing to provide the groundwork, or at least the foundations, for why such a radical reorganization of the school district would even come into the radar scope. See if I can make this go. And this is kind of the big picture. The enrollment in Duval County Public Schools has changed, just much like the market share of Macy's has changed. Our market share has shifted incredibly dramatically. Back in 2009, charter schools were fewer than 2,000, right at 2,000 students. Today, they're almost 25,000 students. Charter schools, when I started working here just 6 years ago, there were roughly 30 some charter schools. As of right now, I think there are 42 or 43 charter schools. Charter schools continue to proliferate in Duval County, and there's little control that the district has on that. The more radical thing impacting us recently is private school scholarships. Just going back to 2019, about 5 years ago, there were about 4,000 students in private school scholarships, and the vast majority of those were the McKay scholarships for students with disabilities and that type of thing. Fast forward to currently, and the number of FTE, full-time equivalent students on scholarships in private schools funded by the state of Florida, funded by taxpayers in Duval County, is now close to in the range of 12,000. We don't have an exact number on that because the state no longer shares that data with us, but we can kind of backdoor it. It's actually probably closer to 12,500, may even be closer to 13,000, but it's in that neighborhood. Nonetheless, whatever that number actually is, significant growth in the last 5 years. So when you think about that in kind of Macy's terms, as a kind of a monopoly on public education back in the early 2000s and certainly the late 90s, our market share would have been much, much higher than it is today. A lot of that market share is now going to these other choice options. So traditional public school enrollment has gone down about 20,000 students since 2009. At that time, we were roughly 125 to 128,000 kids starting in the fall. Next year will be, the projection is actually for us to be under 100,000. And the projection was for us to be under 100,000 this year. We have beaten the projections at least 2 years in a row because we are fighting back in terms of enrollment marketing and that type of thing. But even with those projections, we've lost 20,000 students since 2009. And much like business, we are funded based on the number of customers who choose our service. And so every time we see one of our students go out our door to a charter school or now to a private school, I like to imagine them having a backpack, and in their backpack is roughly $7,200 per child of state funding that goes out with them. Inside that $7,200 is the cost of their instruction. It's the fixed operating costs of running the school. its contribution to the district overhead. Everything is in that package. They may also take some federal funding with them, some other things, depending on the type of student they are. But just on the base general revenue operating, when a student chooses to go to a charter school, that roughly $7,200 goes out the door with them. What that has left us with is kind of an economic situation in running our schools where we have quite a few schools that are below 85% capacity. And when you look at just the pure financial economics of under-enrolled schools, the schools that are below 85% capacity cost almost $42 million more than the dollars that those students are bringing in. So the net effect of this is you go to schools like particularly our high schools, some of our larger schools and like Mandarin and the intercoastal area. And the funding that should be going to those schools with those children and their backpacks has to be taken out to subsidize schools that are below capacity. So just for some other context, we have 107 schools that are below this 85% capacity mark. So we have about 155 schools overall. So roughly 2/3 of them are below the 85% benchmark. So we have about roughly 50 schools subsidizing the schools that are under-enrolled. Even kind of more alarming is we have actually 28 schools last year that ran below 50% capacity. So you have buildings running even below half of what they're capable of serving. And I know Dennis understands from running a law school, that's not a good situation to be in. So what that has resulted in is another economic issue that again is unsustainable, is that the district has used over the last 3 years about $32 million of reserves. So think of this like your family budget or your household budget. You're hopeful that the job that you have or whatever revenue sources are paying your bills January, December. If you find yourself going to your savings account to cover your bills month to month, your household is kind of running out of money, and eventually you're going to get to a point where you don't have that buffer. So you try to budget to live within your means. What the district has been doing for 3 years is been unable to live within its annual funding capabilities, meaning that we've had to dip into our savings account for a cumulative $32 million. We're at the point now where we cannot do that anymore. We have a minimum level of reserves as required by the state. And so we have to come forward with a more realistic balanced budget that's really going to hold up from the beginning of our fiscal year to the end of the fiscal year. And so you may have seen the media around this as well, and stuff that we've put out and put on our website. We have made significant cuts in staffing for the first time that I've ever seen, cuts even in instructional staff positions, not necessarily people. But it positions in order to have a balanced budget. For the most part, a lot of those people are finding jobs within the district because we do have openings. We did have a teacher shortage, but you're seeing these positions being cut. The other major lever that we have to pull is class size. I want to say, I know it's at least 2 years in a row, might be 3, that we've actually increased the class size as another way we can meet budget needs. So more students in the class means fewer teachers needed, and that's how you save money there. None of that is sustainable over the long term. So we've sort of pushed the short-term buttons that we've been able to push. So that's the operating funding of the side, operational funding portion of the puzzle or side of the coin. I'm going to shift over now to the facility side of the coin, which is a different type of funding. And so many of you are probably aware that we had in 2019 a master facility plan that in 2019 was a $1.9 billion master facility plan. That came together with the idea that we would ask voters for a half-penny voluntary half-penny sales tax to fund that plan to deal with deferred maintenance, to reduce the number of seats that the district had. In other words, to right-size the district to address some of the enrollment issues, to trim out some of that operating budget, to really build new schools where new schools needed to be built, consolidating schools, and we have some really great examples where that was done. This recent past school year, we consolidated 3 schools into a brand new, beautiful Rutledge Pearson School on the north side. To make that project happen, we folded Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary School and Henry F. Kite Elementary School into that existing Rutledge Pearson student body and opened up a school big enough and a super beautiful educational space to serve those students. That original plan, again, 2019 is pre-COVID. So again, these are all facilities dollars, capital investment. That plan that the voters saw before they went to the polls was a almost a $2 billion plan, $1.9 billion. So what's happened now is that today we do expect higher revenue because of some of the COVID era inflation and things like that. But unfortunately, construction inflation in the construction industry has radically increased the cost of schools as they were originally projected back in 2019. So where we do expect to receive about $2.5 billion of revenue from the half-penny sales tax, our revised cost on the original 2019 plan went from 1.9 billion to 3.1 billion. So we really have a gap. It's not a hole. We haven't spent this money. It's not like we're in debt. But as we project forward over the next 10 years, actually 12 years, the revenue is not projected to keep up with the cost of construction and the impact that charter school sharing has had on our master facility plan. So there's a $1.4 million gap there. So it was really back in about November where we shared with our board that it would be highly unlikely that we would be able to do the original master facility plan with the budget, with the funding projected as we did in 2019. So I already mentioned construction costs. Another big impact on these costs has been charter school sharing. So even out of that revenue, there have been a couple of sort of legislative events that have caused us to have a reduced revenue because of required charter school funding or charter school sharing. So even as the voters were approving the half penny, state law changed that required us to share the half penny sales tax with charter schools on a per capita basis, meaning that you divide the amount of revenue by the number of students and multiply that times the number going to charter and then the number staying with us. Because of the charter school enrollment growth, we've seen that funding go up each year. So originally when the plan passed, we were sharing about roughly about 13 or 14% with charter schools. Today we're sharing about 20% with charter schools on the half penny. So that obviously impacts the revenue available to us. Additionally, in 2024, this past academic year, the state has required us to share our normal capital funding with charter schools. So the normal capital funding is 1.5 mils. That's been in place since about 2010, and that's been completely dedicated to traditional public schools. Charter school capital was always paid for through a source called PICO, which is public education capital outlay funding. That's actually generated by a telephone tax. That used to be a major source of funding for public educational institutions, colleges, universities, and schools. In recent years, that's all gone to charter schools, and we have kept our total full 1.5 mils. 2024 happened, and the legislature said, not only will you share your half penny, you're also now going to share your 1.5 mils with charter schools, and then charter schools still receive the full balance of the PICO funding. So really on a per student basis, you're seeing charter schools funded at a higher level on capital funding. You know, capital funding is that funding which goes to build buildings, maintain buildings, that type of thing. But you're seeing a higher share go to charter school students now. All of that then has an impact on the funding available to us for our master facilities plan. In addition to the financial issues, there were some other sort of very strong educational related objectives that we had in looking at potential changes to our facilities plan. Fixing some really mixed up boundaries that have happened over the years. And I'll show you an example of that in just a minute, was something we wanted to see. So we've got boundaries of schools that are disconnected. So part of the boundary is over here, and then there's another school, and then the first school's boundary continues there. So fixing some of that stuff this gives us the opportunity to look at that. Feeder patterns are important. Maintaining continuity of students from kindergarten through 12th grade is a great benefit to educational continuity if you're able to accomplish it. So you can think of a program continuity that begins in elementary school, whether it's a STEM program or something of that nature, continues to build through middle and continues through high school. You can imagine what kind of benefit that would have for schools, creating that sense of community among schools that are connected to each other more strongly, was an opportunity that we wanted to see if we could accomplish. And the consultant actually did that in the original plan. So what the proposed plan from the consultant originally considered were just these very, very hard economic goals and objectives. The feeder pattern goals I just mentioned, saving operational and capital cost, right-sizing our schools for projected enrollments. In other words, basically doing what Macy's has done. And Macy's can no longer support X number of retail stores. They've had to invest in online and cut back on retail stores. This plan sort of right sizes in that direction. Reducing deferred maintenance because we no longer even have that full 1.5 mils. Deferred maintenance is going to continue to be a growing problem because we don't have enough funding to meet the maintenance needs of our schools. So reducing that is still a huge goal. And also, like I said, addressing that $1.4 billion facilities gap that I just outlined. What the proposed plan did not consider is any of the intangibles that we're now talking about. Things like the historical relevance of a school. I think the Fishware people have, I think Fishware might be the oldest school that we have at this stage. I know it's a very old school, so a lot of historical relevance there. We didn't consider historical school success. It didn't come into the conversation originally of whether this was traditionally a D or C school or traditionally an A or B school. It was just simply looking at the most economical and efficient way to deploy. Didn't consider any impacts on school accountability or any of the other intangibles like traffic or walkability or anything like that. It was just simply looking sort of at a blank slate, how you would reorganize to meet the current enrollment patterns and projected enrollment patterns that we have. So one example, and there's, I think, 14 feeder pattern groups, and I certainly will, it takes about 4 hours for an expert to explain each one. I'm not going to try to do that, but I'll give you one good example. Terry Parker High School is a school like I was just describing. You can see the outline in blue right there is Terry Parker's current feeder pattern. You can see that the people who live over off of Hendricks Avenue in San Jose up to the river there on the left, they drive clear through the Inglewood High School feeder pattern to get to Terry Parker. We know that we have almost no students coming from that blue island over by the river into Terry Parker. I mean, it's like a handful of students that comes there. Those are the kinds of feeder pattern things we were looking to solve in this process. Current feeders into Terry Parker are Landmark, Arlington, and DuPont Middle. You can see the long list of elementary schools that feed into those middle schools and then ultimately into the high school. So what the consultant did was unify the Terry Parker feeder pattern. So now everything around Terry Parker is zoned for Terry Parker. and then looked at the best deployment of our capital dollars to consolidate schools into something that makes sense to serve that community. So in this original proposal, up in Fort Caroline, the middle school becomes a K-8. There was a lot of interest in K-8. We see a lot of charter schools attracting families to the K-8 model. So there seems to be some momentum for that, and that was part of some of these recommendations. 2 schools would fold into that, Lake Lucina and Fort Caroline. Merrill Road also becomes a K-8 with 2 elementary schools feeding into that K-8. And then over into Arlington, where there's a lot more elementary schools. You have 3 schools folding into Arlington Heights, Woodland Acres. You have 2 schools folding into Southside Estates. Southside is already getting a brand new school that's set to open in 2026. And then you have everybody that lives in that area feeds into 3 middle schools, which feed into 1 high school. And they're not going off to other schools. It becomes a very strong community feeder pattern. So that was the kind of example that's set up for every single neighborhood high school in Duval County. And each of those kind of feeder pattern scenarios is detailed on the website if you want to dig into any of those. But this was the initial proposal, and this is what we originally presented to the board and used to open up the discussion with the community about what I just covered with you, why we're in this situation, why change is necessary, and at least a first proposal to begin that conversation around. The community engagement part of this, much of this has already occurred. There is a little piece going on right now, but we did hold 7 public forums across the community to give people the opportunity to tell our board and our administration what they thought about the plan. We got hundreds of speakers over the course of these 7. I think the highest, I think we had 185, if I remember right, at the first meeting at Fletcher High School. And then all of them were pretty robust conversations. We also published each of the feeder pattern plans on that website. They're still there if you want to go dig in and look at those. There's a video that explains each feeder pattern in detail. This first scenario, this first proposal. And we provided a survey for the community to provide written comments. I think we had almost 4,000 responses to that survey. It's no longer open. But we have consolidated that input, and we're going to be soon publishing a report on all of this input that we received. The final piece of this process was the feeder pattern focus groups, and they've completed sort of phase 1 of their work. This was actually the week before last. We had 3 meetings with this group. We asked every school to send a representative from their school advisory committee to participate in conversations. A little different than the public forums. The public forums were one-way communication of the public telling us what they thought of the plan. These were more conversational with people in each feeder pattern talking about the kind of values and variables that were important to them and things that we should consider. So if you'll remember just a second ago, I talked about what the plan included, that very hard economic efficiency data. This process was designed to get at the softer side of that, those intangibles. Where should other values fit into our thinking as we look at future iterations of the plan? So all of that input is has already gone to our consultants, and they're taking that input and looking at revisions. And those first revisions will be made available to these feeder pattern focus group, these community interest groups in late July. That first meeting scheduled for the 30th. And there could be multiple iterations of this. Dr. Bernier said at the first meeting of this group, actually the second meeting, he said, you know, the next plan isn't the final plan either. This is going to be an ongoing conversation. And there will, in all likelihood, be multiple iterations until we finally get to a conclusion where we're willing to make a recommendation to our school board. So that's sort of the backdrop of the market ecosystem that K-12 education in Duval County, where public schools, where we find ourselves. The planning that went into place to create the original master facility plan that served as the foundation for the half-penny sales tax campaign. And then what's sort of happened radically over the last couple of years, the impact of COVID, the impact of construction inflation, the impact of increased charter school sharing, continued impacts on enrollment that have led us to say, wait a minute, that 2019 plan is no longer feasible. We've got to come up with something different. Layer on top of that, the operational challenges that we have with shrinking enrollment, too many open seats, too many empty schools, or not empty, but too many half-filled or underfilled schools. What that means economically to our day-to-day operation. And this whole effort is to address those issues so that the school district can be strong going forward, and from that position of strength, hopefully begin to grow. So with that, I would be glad to stop sharing my screen. I'm not sure if I know how to do that.
Maybe at the top of your screen?
Yeah,
Is there a stop sharing button? I'm not.
there it is.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, thanks. So that's sort of the backdrop. That's where we find ourselves. And like I said, we're in the middle of this path. The conversation with the community is just beginning. And I'd be glad to tackle any questions you guys have for me.
Yeah, hi. That was very interesting. Thank you so much. I had a question about the half penny tax and the change to sharing that now with charter schools. Did you find that this had a really big effect on the funding for public schools, and was this a big setback?
If I had more research time, I could go in and tell you exactly, but you'd have to define big. It's definitely had an impact. We originally proposed a charter school sharing mechanism that would have used the same types of variables that we were using to distribute money to traditional schools to also distribute to charter schools. Those key variables at the time, this is going back to 2019, were what's the condition of your building, what's your deferred maintenance situation, very much building related, facility related factors. We're not distributing the money that we receive to our schools based on enrollment. If we did that, the wrong schools would get the money. Our biggest schools are our newest schools, Atlantic Coast High School, Waterleaf Elementary. They're brand new. They don't need as much money as schools that are 100 years old in the north side and west side as they need, even though those schools are much smaller. So our distribution was based on facility condition factors. And that's how we originally proposed distributing to charter schools. That was not with that sharing plan, the city council would not vote to put it on the ballot. When the city council delayed putting it on the ballot, we originally had it scheduled for the ballot in 2019. The city council did not approve it to go on the ballot. And then that was the year the legislature made the change to comprehend in law the requirement to share on an FTE basis. So on an FTE basis, charter schools do get much more money than we would have given them if we would have used the facility condition basis. So yeah, excuse me. You also have the growth in charter school enrollment over those years. So that sort of increases that exponentially. And now 2024, we used to count on that 1.5 mil as being 100% for our schools. Now we have to share 20% of that with charter schools. So all of those are pretty significant impacts.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Other questions?
Tracy, I seem to recall hearing that at some point all of the money would go to all the capital money would go to the charter schools?
The PICO funds go to the
Ah.
charter schools. I don't know when that happened, Dennis. I'd have to research it. I know it's been that way since I've been at the district for 6 years. The history on capital funding for education is kind of interesting. That 1.5 mil actually used to be 2 mils. The legislature cut it to 1.5 in over 2 sessions dealing with economic recovery back in, I want to say it was 2008, 2009, may have been 2009, 2010, but somewhere in that era was when it went from 2 mils to 1.5. When that happened is when the district started developing the deferred maintenance problem, and also the inability to put away funds to build a new school where we might need a new school. So as an example, I think Atlantic Coast was the most recent school that opened prior to Rutledge Pearson. There's been significant population growth in the Mandarin E-Town area. There is a need for new schools in that area, but traditional Duval County public schools didn't have the funding with 1.5 mils to be able to put new elementary, new middle in that world. Bartram Springs is a school that runs 115% over capacity. Mandarin High School is a portable field. So we have the need there. But what's happened is because we haven't been able to build, charter schools have moved in to fill that need. So whether that's by design or just, economic factors, we wouldn't have the capacity in Mandarin to serve the students that are attending the, I think, 10 or 11 charter schools that are in that region. So that's been kind of a more of a, Mandarin is sort of a current picture of what the future might look like.
Right. And the voucher system is it possible to be able to predict the results at this point in terms of its impact on your enrollment?
We do have a little bit of history now. I don't know that we have enough trend to be able to predict what future year may look like. Last year was the first year that they took the income cap off, but there was a limit on the amount of funding available. Those limits continue to be expanded. So it's when you start changing all the major variables, it's kind of hard to see where it's going to go. One thing that has definitely happened when I showed you that slide showing the growth from 4,000 to 12,000, there's no doubt that some of those students came from Duval County Public Schools. A lot of that FTE, full-time equivalent enrollment, actually was people already attending the private school that sort of cycled through the system to get the scholarship to continue going to the private school. So a slide that I didn't show you, but I could later on, is the growth in FTE, full-time equivalent enrollment, that's being supported by the state and by the taxpayers of Duval County. It's grown significantly because of the impact of the additional scholarship funded students. So where FTE was bouncing around, roughly 130,000, FTE is now, I think, over 140,000 because of the expansion of the charter school. I'm sorry, not charter school, but the scholarship supported students.
So the total FTE in Duval County, regardless of type of institution, is
That's right.
40,000. Okay.
Somewhere around there. I would want to double check that, but it's in that neighborhood. It has grown significantly over the last 3 or 4 years that we've seen the voucher program grow. And so take a step back into just general foundational basic public school funding structure. We get money from the state, and it's primarily generated through sales tax dollars. And then we have something called required local effort, which is the operating millage that we put on local tax rolls. That required local effort is also determined by the state. So the state tells us what our effort has to be. The school board has to approve that and put it on the trim notice and into that property tax collection process. The school board doesn't set that rate. They only approve the rate that the state tells us that we have to do. So when the state sets its budget and decides how much money we need to raise, they do that based on an FTE projection. So again, 3 or 4 years ago, Duval County residents were funding an FTE base of about 130,000. Again, don't quote me directly on the number, but somewhere in that range. With the impact of the scholarships, the number of students needing funding has risen dramatically, meaning the amount of funding that's needed to fund those students has also risen dramatically. So last year, for the first time in anybody's memory around here, the state actually approved or directed us to increase our required local effort. It was not rolled back. So we got a lot of feedback from taxpayers because the public school impact on your property tax bill was significantly higher last year than it was the year before. Part of that was the 1 mil, which voters approved, but another big part of that was the increase in the required local effort to be able to underwrite the cost of the expanded FTE. I hope that makes sense. Tried to simplify.
No, it makes, unfortunately, it makes too much sense.
Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, I was honestly surprised when I got my own trim notice. Like, what? I knew about the 1 mil. And I had to go back and do the math on the required local effort. So what you're saying is, you know, you have the shift, and it's not a secret. I mean, state of Florida has been shifting to more choice for I don't know, when was the Bush era? 20 years, right? The expansion of the scholarship, most of that time, the choice was between a small number of charter schools. And of course, we had the magnet program and things like that, where we've always supported choice within our own schools as well. However, in most recent years, you've had the proliferation of magnet schools because there are almost no controls on them. And the school board certainly has no authority really to deny a magnet school as long as they meet the minimum requirements, contractual requirements of the state, and the state provides the contract. So if they check those boxes, the school board has no choice to say, well, we really don't need that charter school. You just don't have that. So that's how you end up with one of my favorite examples is we've had Alamacani Elementary School operating over in the Intercoastal region. It's been an A school for 20-some years, really successful, great school community. No reason for competition there, and we had a charter school open up directly across the street. I mean, so directly across the street that we now have traffic issues,
Right,
with their drop off and our drop off and all of that, and people are looking to us to solve that problem. We're like, we didn't have a problem. Tell them to solve it, but no. So you know, we work with the city, we work with the police, we work with the charter school to keep students safe and solve those kinds of things. But you know, there was no educational performance reason for that. But we have no control. We have no control about where they go, and quite frankly, the city of Jacksonville doesn't have any control from a zoning perspective. They have a lot of leeway, and they don't even have to tell us where they're going until something like 90 days before school starts. So, you know, a lot of the feedback that we heard in the public forums was, you know, don't close our beloved public school, close that charter school down the street. And the answer is, unless that charter school fails twice in a row, we can't close it. It's going to be there, and we have to learn to compete. So, and that's what we're doing. I mean, we're working to compete. Like I said, we've beaten the projection, which is critical. We haven't seen enrollment turn around and grow yet. But if we can do the right things from a product and service standpoint and a marketing standpoint, I think we can compete in the environment. So those challenges are on us. Dr. Bernier's here and he recognizes those challenges. And I've heard him say it in media interviews, we got to show we got a better product. And a lot of cases, most cases we do. And so we just have to fight that fight.
Are there districts that have similar situations,
Mhm.
both within Florida and elsewhere that help find, get ideas for success?
I don't know about ideas. I do know that I think Hillsborough is dealing with something very similar. I know Broward is dealing with something very similar. I saw something in the news a month or two ago. I think it was Philadelphia. I think these kinds of impacts are happening all across the country in some way, shape, or form. A lot of school districts, and we're one of them, dealt with post-COVID. Like a lot of students just didn't come back. It just got smaller. Homeschool, I didn't mention that in my graphs. Homeschool is another, it's not a huge piece, but it is a quickly growing piece of quote unquote competition for us. So, students will come out and homeschoolers can now pick up on those scholarships as well.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't touch on that, but there's a lot that a homeschool can use to get that funding and use it for, physical education equipment like new kayaks, big screen TVs or computer monitors for instructional resources. There's a lot of that that's available to them as well. So I know a lot of districts are facing the same types of operational factors and needing to sort of retrench like Macy's to stay strong and to be able to compete in the marketplace.
I'm sure there are others that have questions. I did have a question. Will the slides, can you make the slides available?
I did. I think I sent a PDF version to Carmen. Did you get that, Carmen?
Yes, I did.
Great, awesome, thank you. We'll get that out to the attendees then. Others have questions?
Yeah, I do have a question. So I was wondering if the school closures were like heavily affecting standardized testing and those looking to like apply to college. I guess, in terms of resources available, if you could just provide information on that.
Well, the school closures that are in the consultants plan, I'm glad you asked the question because this has been a little bit of a piece of misinformation that's been out there. The timeline for any of these decisions, implementing these, is really kind of a 2 to 10 year timeline. So even if you might see a school consolidation show up in the plan, in the final plan, it's definitely not happening in the 24-25 school year. The earliest it could happen would be the 25-26 school year. And really, when you look at construction lead times and things like that, in all likelihood, it wouldn't even be till after that. We have had consolidations already in the original master facility plan. I already mentioned the 3 schools that became one in Rutledge Pearson. We have a school that is consolidating into Highlands. Pine Estates Elementary School has completed its service. It's closed after this year. Those students are merged into Highlands Estates, which will be a brand new school that opens next year. All of that was part of the original master facilities plan that was part of the 2019 plan that the board approved. So none of that was a surprise. None of this is a surprise to those folks. Our first really brand new school is Chafee Middle School, and it is out kind of between the west side and Baldwin. I don't know if you know where the Chafee area is, but it's out in the west. It helps relieve overcrowding in Baldwin, and it is serving most of the students from Charter Academy and a brand new middle school, and a couple other schools are involved with that. Charter Academy will not open as a Charter Academy will not open as a middle school next year. The building's closed right now, and the original plan is slated to become an elementary school. As it relates to support for students in kind of college testing and that type of thing, I don't think there's a real strong relationship, except to say that the operational impacts of the fact that we have far more seats than we need right now, and all of those seats cost money. And so the money that you might have to put student supports into a school that's continuing on is really kind of wrapped up right now in these schools that have less than 50% capacity, less than 85% capacity. So the extent to which we're able to consolidate some of those schools, working with our community, make some of those very hard decisions, will enable us to free up more dollars that can go into the schools that remain to improve the experience for students and families and teachers in the remaining schools. So again, that's part of the benefit here, is that by reducing the operating cost, the administrative overhead, by consolidating schools that are under-enrolled, you then free up those dollars to invest in the high schools, the middle schools, the elementary schools that remain, to improve services there. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it did. Thank you. But to build off of that, I was wondering if you foresee these closures impacting students' academic progress.
I don't think they'll impact their academic progress at all. One of the things we have to sort out with the community along the way is how the programs continue. And whenever we've consolidated a school, we go into the community and we talk to the community about what kind of programming do you want to see in the consolidated school. But a consolidation doesn't impact class size. It doesn't necessarily impact programming, because we have those conversations with the community. It really shouldn't impact student academic progress. We have schools all across the community that are serving students in schools of 600, 700, 800, 900 students that do exceptionally well. And those students progress just fine. There's really not a real strong relationship, except for what I was saying earlier, that freeing up some of these dollars that are right now going to administrative overhead. So examples of that would be just if you have one student in a building, I know that's an extreme, crazy example, but if you just have a small group in a building, the building's going to have a principal, the building's going to have a media center, a cafeteria, and a maintenance crew, all the support that goes with that. A new piece that every building's going to have is they're going to have a strong security support group, and all of that is kind of what adds up to that administrative overhead. None of it necessarily directly impacts instruction. So really good example that we have right now, which is a situation that the board has addressed, but we have RV Daniels and RL Brown are both schools, and I think have less than 200 students each. I'll say for sure less than 300. And they each have that administrative overhead staff. And in those meetings, our chief financial officer said that for both schools, it's about $750,000. So by merging them, you still have one school. Instead of spending $750,000 on this overhead and $750,000 on that overhead, you not only have to spend that once, and you free up $750,000 that can be used to invest in the quality of the learning experience, which would only enhance things for students. There's really nothing that I can think of about a consolidation that would be a barrier to a student progressing.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Brooke.
I have a question regarding the students. Do you think, because of the school closures, do you think it has any long-term impacts on their like social well-being because of moving from one school to another, transferring from a different area of their community, anything like
I can't
that?
say that. I don't think we've experienced that. We have. This is not. We have consolidated schools. I mentioned a few. Brentwood, 3 or 4 years ago, was consolidated in the North Shore. The principals work really closely with teachers and with communities to make those transitions go as smooth and productive as possible. They do work to orient and kind of integrate the children coming into the school into the new community. Same thing with families and parents. They do work to make sure those kids make friends to make sure this, that the two groups just kind of come together. It's intentional to do that. I'm not going to say that, there's not any student that isn't apprehensive or have some kind of anxiety about a new situation. Those kinds of things are real. But all in all, they tend to work very well. Rutledge Pearson has had a great year. And that was 3 communities coming together in one school. Usually in the cases that we've had with our original master facility plan, I mean, you're talking about, there's the excitement of going to a brand new school. So, I mean, if you would have seen Rutledge Pearson as it existed in 2022, I mean, I don't even know how to describe it. It's terrible. No child should have to go to a school and environment like that. And credit to the principal and the faculty and the staff at that school for building community inside of a building that needed to be torn down 20 years ago. There's just an inappropriate learning environment. And then you drive up to the new Rutledge Pearson and you see the beauty, the aesthetic beauty that these kids, I mean, it's just a message of how important they are and how important education is when you see a school like that. So in most of these situations, we've been able to work with those families and those students to see the benefit against the trade-off, and being able to come to a school like Rutledge Pearson is just a huge, huge benefit.
Perfect. Thank you. That's really great to hear.
You're welcome.
I have a question. Do you feel that there is more promotion of just free choice of, which school might provide the most for the student, or are there incentives for the students to remain at the traditional public schools?
Well, I don't know if this gets to the heart of your question or not. I will tell you that since charter schools came on the scene, many of those charter schools are part of large kind of corporate organizations. They may be for-profit, they may be nonprofit, but they have that corporate support behind them, and they have come with highly sophisticated marketing and enrollment development, customer service, brand development sort of strategies and structures around them. This was something that traditional public education for 100 years didn't have to do. It's now, those are muscles that we have to develop to be able to compete in a marketplace. But charter schools came into the marketplace with those muscles already developed because they had to win enrollment from us, and obviously they've done that. It's our challenge now, as I was saying earlier, to not just to work both on the quality of the product, the quality of the service, the quality of the experience, and the quality of the marketing to be able to compete in this new ecosystem. Just like Macy's never had to compete with an Amazon. They only had to compete with the Dillards, and they knew how to do that. They didn't know how to compete with an Amazon. Traditional public education didn't know how to compete with the charter schools or with in a massive choice kind of free market situation. We have to do that now, and that's the challenge that's on us.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions?
Well, we're just about out of time. Carmen, did you want to wrap up?
Yeah. Thank you so much for that great presentation. I think we all learned so much. I definitely did. Thank you, Dr. Tracy Pierce, for taking time out of your day to give that presentation. And thank you so much for all the attendees for joining. And yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
You're welcome, Dan. It's been a pleasure.
It's a great presentation, and in all my life, I've never seen anything so such a big change in so short a time. And I admire you and your staff and the school system for taking it on. We really appreciate the work you're doing.
Well, and I know I can speak for all of us here. We appreciate your support. We appreciate people who support traditional public education and help us to grow that strength, to grow that muscle mass that we need to compete. And I know you guys are helping us, and so thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.